Hey everyone, and welcome to the first of what I hope to be a small series of videos here on my channel, showcasing some of the board games that I have in my collection that I've accumulated over the years. Some are relatively new, some are old that have been around for a while, some are old and I'd like to go and I'm going to be reviewing here in a moment. But I just recently acquired, and was actually surprised when they found out it was even made. If you've watched TV for a while, especially anything from before the 1980s, you've probably heard the name of Jack Webb. Jack Webb played Sergeant Friday on the TV show Dragnet, which was very successful, and I believe is still in reruns today, as well as all the episodes are on DVD as well, I believe. He then did a spin-off of Dragnet not long after the show was on the air, and that was in 1968, and that show was called Adam 12, which followed the two LAPD police officers, Reed and Malloy, as they went around their daily activities on their beat, patrolling the streets of Los Angeles. In January 1972, Jack Webb did a little bit of a diversion from his two previous shows featuring the police drama, and he dove into the medical field and first responder field, and that show, of course, was Emergency. Emergency started out in pilot episode was January 1972. It was a 2-hour pilot with 11 one-hour episodes for the rest of the first season. The show went on to have another 5 full seasons, and then a 6th season of, a 7th season of 6 2-hour specials. With the last one being where paramedics Gage and DeSoto got promoted to captain, and they reminisced about their rescues over the show. The show, rather than focusing on police work, like I said, it focused on primarily Los Angeles County Fire Department Station number 51, and primarily there it followed paramedics Gage and DeSoto, as well as the staff at nearby Rampart General Hospital. The show was very successful. It's all the episodes are out on DVD. I've got the entire series on DVD, and it was very groundbreaking at the time, showing it's basically been the grandfather of all the medical dramas we have now on TV. So as popular as the show was, I was not aware that back in shortly after the show began, that they had made a board game out of it. A lot of TV shows and movies, they make board games out of the show or movie. I was not aware that they had done one for Emergency up until a couple years ago when I was at an antiques mall and found the game there at a pretty reasonable price. And I went ahead and got it. Totally expecting it to be completely related to the show, and then I got home and found out it was loosely based on the show. It's not really based on the show, but it's loosely based on the show. But let me go ahead and we'll open this up and take a look and see what we've got inside and how the game's played. Looking at the cover of the game, it would appear that the game is based on a TV show. You have screen captures from the show. This picture is definitely from episode 1 of season 2, where a man was working in his garage and a car engine fell on him. Of course, you got the firefighters with 51 on their helmets, as well as 51 on the engine in the background. So you would think it was pretty much based on the show. Inside you got of course you have the standard instructions for how the game's played. And then you open up the game board, and here we have a map of a city. The map, it's not an actual map of Los Angeles like what was on the show, but it's just basically a generic little town city scene with a residential area, rural area with camping grounds and stuff like that, and then a downtown area and that sort of thing. There are 4 fire stations, red and yellow down here at the bottom right, or bottom left, and blue and green up at the top right. Up the top left we have a hospital, and most of the streets are 2-lane. You can go both ways on these. There are some 1-lane roads or streets. We'll cover how you navigate those in a minute. Most of these are 2-way. There are some though that are 1-way streets here and down here, as well as coming across on the street here and going through the tunnel around here. Then we have the 4 fire trucks, red, yellow, green, and blue. And then we have 24 emergency cards for different locations around the board. And then we have 8 hospital cards. We'll go over those in a moment here. And then the bottom of the board is, or the box, is the spinner, which takes, even though it's a small spinner, takes up the entire bottom of the box. Numbers 1 through 6, and then same numbers with spin again, all the way around. And so that's all the components of the game, which really basically, really simple. The way the game is played, you basically spin to see who goes first, and then you draw a card. The cards are shuffled and turned up face down in a pile. You draw from the top of the pile until you get an emergency card. If you get a hospital card, you simply hang on to that, but you draw a card and go to the emergency. This one here says go to area 8, people trapped in elevator jammed between floors. So then you get in your, you take your fire truck, spin to see how far you go, and then you proceed to area 8, which in this case, the red truck, if it drew area 8, would be going down the street over here to area where this location is here. Once you're done there, if you have a hospital card, you go from area 8, that area where your trouble was, or where your rescue was, and you would go up here to the hospital. Once you get up here to the hospital, your rescue is considered complete. If you don't have to go to the hospital, if you don't have the hospital card, you would then go from your rescue location back to your station, where the rescue is then considered complete. You're supposed to put your card on that location to symbolize it's complete. Once you complete 3 missions, or 3 rescues, you basically win the game, and that's basically how the game is played. There's no real, it's not really that complicated. When you play the game, if you have more than 1 hospital card and you land on the same space as another opponent, you give your opponent, you can give your opponent one of those hospital cards, so that way they're delayed then getting back to their fire station to complete their rescue. When you're also when you're on these 1-lane streets, if one engine is blocked here, no one else can go down this street because it's a 1-lane road or street, and you won't be able to get through that way, and you'd have to basically back up and choose another route. Then of course when you get to a stop sign at an intersection, that spin is over. You can't go any further. Unless you would have a spin again, then you would just spin again to go ahead, but stop signs basically cut your how far you're moving short during that turn. There are, I believe it's 18 different rescue locations. There's 24 cards, so some of the cards are there's more than some of the spots. There's two rescue cards, so you might have an opponent going to their same rescue as you, or same location as you for a rescue. There are some drawbacks. Basically, if you play the game exactly how the game board has it, the game board says, or the instructions have the instructions saying that you don't have to have an exact spin to get onto any of the rescue locations or onto your fire station. So it doesn't say anything about the hospital, so but the way you play the game's played, it goes very, very fast. I mean, basically, if you watch the show, it's not quite exactly how things play play out on the show, which I'll get to here in a moment. One of the things, some of the criticisms, I guess you could say, or drawbacks of the game pieces are little miniature fire trucks. These look like they're almost like the little versions of the Crown fire trucks that were used in the first and second season of the show, although they showed up later in later episodes as well. But they look like the Crown versions of the show, which actually would make sense because the game, copyright on the game, at least my version is 1973. I guess there's other versions I've heard of online that have copyright of 1972. So it makes sense then for them to have the Crown truck instead of any of the other trucks. But if you watch the show enough, you know that the primary vehicle used in the show was the fire department rescue squads, not the engine. The engine played a major part in the show, but the show followed Gage and DeSoto, and they were in a rescue squad, not the engine. So that's one drawback of the pieces, which is a minor criticism on that. But then you get to the board, and the pieces are actually bigger than the spaces where you're playing the game. At least most of the way throughout the whole board. And not only that, you got these spaces down here, like at the corners of these two intersections here, where, I mean, the truck's nearly twice as big as the space. So it's kind of confusing. You have to basically make sure when you're playing the game, I always make sure that the truck's centered over the space it's supposed to be in. Because if you have it too far back, it looks almost like it's in two spaces, and you can't really tell which one it's supposed to be in. So the other drawback of the game that I have is, it says that you don't need exact spins for landing on your fire station or rescue location or the hospital, but it doesn't say anything about the hospital. So that's another criticism, that they don't specify anything about the hospital. And the fact that you don't have to have an exact spin, that kind of takes out a little bit of the competition, I think. The other thing that the game doesn't really clarify on is the space for the driveways for the different fire stations. It doesn't say if this driveway space or this driveway space are part of these stations, or if they're actual separate spaces, because it tells you that you're supposed to put your emergency card here, but the cards are actually bigger than the spaces for the individual stations. So that kind of doesn't really clarify that, or the game doesn't really clarify that. Also, it doesn't another thing on the show, if you watch the show long enough, they would have rescues where sometimes, like on the game, you went there, did the rescue, and we're done. You know, it'd be like a quick 1-minute thing, like someone getting their hand unstuck from a kitchen sink or something like that. The other times, though, there would be rescues where they would go and the rescue would be literally half the episode because it was like a major disaster or something like that. Or like, you know, like in, I think it was season 3 in the snakebite episode, where the first half of the episode was Gage DeSoto and Chuck Kelly. They were returning from a fishing trip out of state, and you know, they rescued a woman and her son who had been in a car accident. They spent the half hour, or the first half of the episode, doing that. The other half of the episode was a car accident there in Los Angeles County, where they did the rescue there, and then Gage got bit by a rattlesnake and had to be rushed to the hospital. And that was the other half of the episode. So it's like, you know, the rescues weren't always, you know, in and out right away. Also, in the game, they have you at the hospital. When you go to the hospital, your mission's considered complete, and then you draw another card and go out on your next rescue. Well, on the show, whenever they finished at the hospital and went available, they didn't always go out on another rescue. Oftentimes, they would just return back to their station. So that's another case where there should have been some change up as to, you know, whether or not you're going to go out on another run or you're going to return to your station after the hospital. So while the game was loosely based on the show, there's some changes that I've actually come up with. I actually have an amended list of rules for the game where I clarified some of the stuff that can actually add to the gameplay. For example, while you don't really need to have an exact spin to get to your rescue location or the hospital, I have it where to get back to your headquarters or your station, you have to basically get an exact spin to get back to your station. Also, at the station, the driveway is, I do consider the driveway part of the actual station. So basically, once you're in the driveway, you're on the fire station property and you're back to your quarters. Also, to change things up when you're at a rescue location, say you're here at this refinery here, basically, in order to leave your rescue location, to go back either to your quarters or to the hospital, you have to spin a 5 or a 6. If you spin a 5 or a 6, then you get to leave. If you spin 4 or lower, you have to remain there at your rescue location for that rescue. Of course, if you get a spin again, 1 through 4, then you get to spin again to see if you get either 5 or 6. At the hospital, to change things up at the hospital, I made it so that if you spin a 4, 5, or 6, you simply go back to your quarters. If you spin 1, 2, or 3, you draw a card from the pile. If you get an emergency card, you go to that rescue. If you get a hospital card, you go back to your quarters. Once you're back to your quarters, your mission is complete. It's not complete just because you went to the hospital. But then you get back to your quarters, and I'll expand on that here in a moment. But you get back to your quarters, and if you draw a hospital card, and then your mission is considered complete, or your emergency run is considered complete. And basically, for my way of playing the game, since on the show, Gage and DeSoto had to log their rescues, and they did that once they were back to the station. Basically, I don't consider the rescues complete until you get back to your headquarters. There's one episode where Gage and Soto went out on several runs before getting back to the station, and then they had to log all of their calls into the logbook. And the whole episode is basically Gage and Soto struggling to come up with better ways of logging their calls so they keep track of everything. And so that's kind of what I'm with the way I play it. I've changed it up to make it a little bit more like it was on the show. Another thing that I've done for gameplay for when I play this game, like I said earlier, always make sure that the game pieces are centered over the spaces. They might not exactly fit, but make sure they're centered over the spaces so you know which space they're supposed to be on. The other issue, one thing I forgot to point out earlier too, the issue I have with the board is some of these rescues are not clearly, or rescue locations are not clearly marked as to where they are on the board. Move these out of the way here. For example, up here, emergency location 14, it's marked by a red dot. That is out here on the road, so obviously the truck, your fire truck's going to stop you here on the road to complete the rescue. However, you go to some places like up here at 16, or down here at 7, or all along here on this downtown area, all the rescue locations, the red dots are actually off of the road or in the street. So it's not really clear if you're supposed to stop on the street or if you're supposed to stop on that location. So what I've done, I actually clarified, of course you can do this on your own if you have this game, and you can clarify where these where you're supposed to stop for each of these rescue locations. In my gameplay, like for down here along these spaces here, or these rescue locations here, basically I count these as an extra space where you have to basically pull off of the road to get to the rescue location. On the show there was oftentimes where they had to pull into a private driveway or alleyway or parking lot for home or business, and to basically get to the rescue location. So that's where, if the rescue location's off of the dot, I basically went through all the spaces and marked what space that you're supposed to pull off of to get to that space. So if you are coming to the, say down here to Stadium 11, coming up from 10, you get to this space here and then come off to get to the rescue location. Then there's another spot like down here where it's supposed to be the corner of this intersection here. It doesn't say what what corner, so basically I have in my instructions to use, as long as you stop in that space, then you're on that corner. Now since the way I play it, you have to keep track of multiple rescues that you've been on. I came up with an idea of using these colored index cards, and top half basically keeps track of the current run that you're on, and then the bottom half keeps track of previous runs that you've been on that haven't been logged yet. So basically, when you draw your cards, say you draw a hospital card, that goes up under your previous or your current run, and then when you draw your emergency card, that goes under the current run as well. So you go to your rescue, which is area 8, and when you're done there, once you've spun it to 5 or 6 and you get to leave that location, that card goes down here to previous runs. You then follow what's in the current run, which in this case is the hospital, and then you would end up going all the way up here to the hospital, where you would deposit that card. Now, if you didn't have a hospital card and just went back to the station, that this card would just stay down here in the previous runs. If you go to the hospital and draw a card and you draw either a hospital card or another emergency card, that goes up here in current run. Obviously, if you draw a hospital card, you're already at the hospital, so you go back and save that hospital card for your next emergency run. If you draw another emergency run, you put that on your current run, and then you go to that one, which in this case, Tunnel and Park Avenue, which you come down. Actually, you'd have to go all the way around here to get to the tunnel. And then, of course, you follow the same procedure. Spin a 5 or 6, then you would get to go off. So once you finish the emergency run, then if you have another hospital card, of course you go to the hospital. If you don't have a hospital card, you go back to your station. Once you're back to your station, again you have to get, the way I play it, you have to get the exact spin to get down here to your station. These 2 emergency runs then get logged, so you would have 2 emergency runs added to your score. And of course, once you get to 3, you win, and the game's over. And again, it adds the way that this plays it, or the way my rules have it here. You know, this changes it up a little bit, adds some variety as to whether or not someone's going to go out and get a single run and go back to the station, or you know, how many runs you have to go through and how long you're going to be at each emergency location. It just changes everything up and makes it a little bit more of a variety and surprise for who gets called on what, or how many runs you have to get and everything. So playing the game with my expanded rules, you know, you can play it to where you have the 3 rescues to win the game. Another option, if you're not like a time crunch or anything, you can play the game to where you basically just keep drawing emergency cards or keep going out on rescues until you know, the emergencies are all completed and everyone's back to the station. And then, you know, whoever has the most rescues wins. Another way you could play it too is, especially if time's not an issue, once the calls are logged in, just keep track of who has how many runs under their belt. Put the cards back into the pile, and then, you know, just keep going indefinitely for how many runs, or how many runs you want to go, and everything. And you know, then whenever it comes time to ending the game, whoever of course has the most rescues wins that way. So that's in a couple ways that you can change it up to make it a little more interesting, rather than just playing it to 3 rescues to win like the game has it. So that's a look at the emergency game. It's released by Milton Bradley back, like I said, around 72, 73, when the show was in its 2nd season. Like I said, it's loosely based on the show. They've made it into more of a game rather than, you know, some of the serious stuff that happened on the show. You know, it's a fun little game, and you know, the enhanced rules that I've come up with, you know, it can make it a little more interesting and make it a little more challenging to, you know, complete the rescues and try and get back to beat your opponents back to the station. You know, plus my enhanced rules to, you know, vary the rescues and trips to the hospital and everything to make it a little bit more like on the actual show. So, anyways, that's the emergency game. If you like this video, please hit the like button, comment, subscribe. If you like this video, I've got a few more games I would love to review, and so until next time, have a good one.